How can two purchases cost the same amount while one makes your life richer and the other quietly replaces it? The usual advice says the cheaper choice is responsible, the luxury choice is wasteful, the experience is meaningful. The object is shallow. Real life is not that obedient. Mara had $14,000. She could use it to renovate a kitchen her family used every day. Or she could spend nearly all of it on a slow train journey through the Canadian Rockies that Daniel had dreamed about for years. One sounded practical, the other sounded indulgent. Lily's answer would expose why both descriptions were wrong. Hi, I'm Sarah, and this is Wise Mind Stories. In this episode, you'll learn how to separate utility from status, why price alone tells you almost nothing about value, and one question that reveals whether a purchase is a destination or a doorway. Mara believed the kitchen would improve their daily life, but she had not yet asked whose daily life she was picturing. Daniel taped a rail map to the refrigerator. Rivergate to Vancouver. Vancouver to Jasper. 3 days through mountains, with glass roof observation cars and a small sleeper compartment. Lily traced the line with one finger. We sleep on the train? If your mother agrees to the room with beds, Daniel said. Mara looked at the total: flights, train, hotels, food, and the week of summer work she would miss, $13,600. That is not a vacation, she said. That is a used car. Daniel folded the estimate. It is also the trip we postponed when Lily was 6 and 8 and 10. Mara opened the Ascend renovation quote on her tablet. New cabinet fronts, better lighting, a stone countertop, $14,100. We use the kitchen every day, she said. The trip lasts 9 days. Daniel looked around. What can't we do in this kitchen? Mara saw the chipped cabinet by the dishwasher, the overhead light that made every dinner look tired, the laminate counter beside the walnut table. It does not fit the rest of the house anymore. Daniel leaned against the refrigerator. That was not my question. Mara recognized Grandma Joe's line. She disliked it more the second time. Housel asks readers to distinguish utility from status. Utility is what something allows you to do. Status is what something allows you to signal. The distinction is not the same as cheap versus expensive, necessary versus frivolous, or object versus experience. An expensive car may have enormous utility to someone who loves driving, values engineering, and uses it on roads that turn the machine into an experience. The same car may be almost pure status to someone who hates driving and wants only to be seen arriving. A modest purchase can be wasteful if it adds no real life. A large purchase can be wise if it becomes a conduit for something you deeply value. Value is not what an object is. Value is what your life becomes through it. Mara described the kitchen as practical. But practical for what? She did not cook often. Daniel did. He said the cabinets worked. Lily liked the counter because paint washed off it easily. The lighting could be fixed for $300. The renovation's strongest utility was not cooking. It was making the dining room look coherent when people from work visited. Daniel's trip sounded indulgent, but he had spent years studying public transit. Lily built cities around trains. Grandma Joe had told stories of crossing the country by rail when she was young. The trip connected 3 people's interests: a limited season of Lily's childhood and Daniel's new project. Its utility would not be found in the ticket. It would be found in what happened through it. The book tells the story of billionaire Bill Koch, an avid wine collector who purchased bottles presented as rare wines, once owned by Thomas Jefferson. They were later exposed as counterfeit. The liquid did not suddenly change when the story collapsed. What changed was the meaning surrounding it. That is the fragile power of status value. It often depends on provenance, exclusivity, recognition, and a shared agreement about what the object says. When the agreement disappears, much of the emotional value can disappear with it. This does not make collecting foolish. Story can be a genuine part of enjoyment. History, craft, beauty, and community are forms of utility too. But if your pleasure requires other people to believe the signal, you do not fully own the pleasure. The audience does. Mara created a private test. She imagined the renovated kitchen in a world where Ben could never see it. No leadership dinners, no video calls, no ascend photographs teaching her what finished looked like. The stone countertop lost some of its shine. Then she imagined the train trip in a world where no photographs could be posted, no coworkers could envy it, and no one outside the family would ever know. Lily was still pressed against the glass roof, looking for mountain goats. Daniel was still explaining how trains gained altitude. The experience survived the disappearance of the audience. There was another hidden cost in the kitchen, quote, "The countertop price was visible, the disruption was not. 3 weeks of contractors, meals eaten from boxes, Mara answering design questions during work. Daniel managing dust and delivery windows on his reduced schedule. A purchase advertised as convenience would begin by consuming attention from the person it was supposedly helping. The train carried hidden costs too: fatigue, work waiting on return, and 4 people sharing small rooms. Utility does not mean pretending a purchase has no downside. It means counting the whole experience rather than the most flattering part. When Mara counted honestly, the kitchen bought a more impressive background plus weeks of disruption. The train bought inconvenience too, but the inconvenience was attached to something the family actively wanted to do together. Housel discusses financial writer Carl Richards buying a bicycle that cost around $6,000. That price can sound absurd if the category is simply bicycle, but Richards used it constantly. It became exercise, time outdoors, friendship, challenge, and joy. Measured by the hours and meaning it created, the expensive bike could be cheaper than many modest purchases that were barely used. Cost per use is not a perfect formula. Love does not fit neatly into a division problem. But the case exposes how moral labels attach to price before we examine life return. Mara knew people who had spent less on vacations that left them exhausted and resentful. She knew families whose beautiful kitchens were the center of daily connection. There was no universal winning category. The right question was not, which purchase sounds responsible? It was, which purchase becomes a repeated behavior we value? That night, Mara asked Lily, if we fixed the kitchen, what would be different? Lily considered it. You would tell me to be careful on a different counter. Daniel tried not to laugh. Mara deserved it. And the trip? Dad would talk about trains for 9 days. That is the downside, Daniel said. Lily smiled. But we would be there when he did. The answer revealed the emotional reversal. Mara thought a daily use object automatically possessed more utility than a temporary experience. But the kitchen renovation would mostly improve the background. The trip would change their behavior toward one another. The best purchase is rarely the one you look at most. It is the one that changes what you do. Housel's chapter on risk and regret adds a second dimension. Financial decisions are not only about expected returns, they are also about which future regret you can live with. Spend the money, and you may regret losing the margin. Save it, and you may regret losing the moment. There is no calculation that removes uncertainty because regret depends on the person, the timing, and what the money was competing against. The family could take a cheaper trip later, but later was not an identical product. Lily would not be 12 later. Daniel's transit project would not be new later. Grandma Joe's health, which everyone treated as permanent because it had been stable, was not guaranteed later. At the same time, spending every dollar in the name of memory would be reckless. Future emergencies are also real life. Good spending must survive both truths. Mara opened the accounts. The train trip would not touch their emergency runway if they delayed the kitchen and used the portion of the Ascend bonus already set aside for family travel. The choice was expensive. It was not fragile. She booked 3 tickets. Then she paused. 4, Daniel said. Grandma Joe refused on the first call. That is too much money. It is our money, Mara said, which is why you should keep it. Mara looked at Daniel. Her mother's fear of spending had protected her for decades. It was also becoming a wall. Mom, you told that train story my entire childhood. A story is free. Come help us make another one. Joe was silent for so long that Mara thought the call had dropped. Finally, she said, I will pay for my food. It was not surrender. It was how Joe allowed herself to say yes. On the second morning of the journey, the train climbed beside a river the color of steel. Lily and Grandma Joe sat beneath the glass roof playing cards. Daniel had been talking about track geometry for 11 uninterrupted minutes. Mara was happy. Not because trains are inherently meaningful, not because experiences are always superior to objects. She was happy because the money had become a doorway into behavior she valued. Attention, curiosity, family story, and time no meeting could divide into 15-minute blocks. Then her phone vibrated. Ben had sent the acquisition schedule. The diligence meeting had moved to the day after they returned. Below it was a message from a colleague named Elliot, Brightcart's head of partnerships, celebrating early. The photo showed Elliot beside a lake house he had just purchased after investing in a logistics startup. The house cost more than Mara expected to earn in 10 years. She looked from the photograph to the train window. For 3 seconds, the trip shrank. The family had not changed. The mountains had not changed. Only the comparison had entered. Mara turned the phone face down, but the image remained. Today's action is the conduit question. For one purchase you are considering, ask, what will this let me do repeatedly that I value? Not what will it say. Not how will it photograph. What behavior will pass through it. A dining table might create weekly dinners. A camera might create years of careful seeing. A premium mattress might create better sleep. A trip might create 9 days of arguments and jet lag. Do not reward an object or an experience simply for belonging to the approved category. Name the behavior. If you cannot, you may be buying a destination, something whose emotional return ends when you possess it. If you can, you may be buying a doorway. Back on the train, Lily fell asleep against Grandma Joe's shoulder. Daniel pointed toward a distant waterfall. Mara took one photograph. Then she put the phone away. $14,000 had not purchased happiness. It had purchased a setting in which 4 people could practice it. That difference was the art. Mara thought the practical purchase was the kitchen, and the indulgent one was the train. The real difference had nothing to do with object versus experience. It was utility versus status. That is today's insight. Price tells you what money leaves your account. The conduit question tells you what enters your life. Ask it once today. What will this purchase let me do repeatedly that I value? If you cannot name the behavior, wait. Subscribe to Wise Mind Stories if you want to spend less by rule and more by understanding. Mara has found a purchase that serves her values. Yet one photograph of Elliot's lake house has already made her own life feel smaller. Soon he will offer her a chance to catch up. And the most dangerous part is that it will look exactly like ambition. Next episode teaser. Elliot's lake house came from one private investment made before anyone else saw the opportunity. Now he is inviting Mara into the next one. She knows almost nothing about it, but everyone around her seems to be getting ahead. The question is no longer what the investment can earn, it is what feeling Mara is trying to escape.